Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
My name is Bo, and I'm 32 years old. Life's pretty good these days: successful tech company, beautiful home in Silicon Valley, and a partner who actually respects me. Funny how things change. This morning, I received an invitation to a family reunion, which brought back memories I've tried to forget. That missing bracelet changed everything for me. When Grandma Alina passed last year and left her entire inheritance to me instead of my sister, I wasn't prepared for the fallout. Before I get into this story, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with family favoritism, hit that like button and subscribe as we explore how one missing bracelet changed my entire life. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia. Our house wasn't anything special, a 4-bedroom suburban home with a decent backyard and a tire swing that I installed myself because my dad was always too busy. That tire swing became my thinking spot, especially after my sister Alicia was born when I was just 2 years old. The favoritism wasn't obvious at first. It started with small things, the way my mom would rush to Alicia when she cried but tell me to toughen up when I got hurt. My dad, Frank, worked at an accounting firm and always brought home little gifts for Alicia. For me, well, I was just expected to be grateful for having food and shelter. I still remember my 8th birthday. I had been hinting for weeks about this science kit I saw at the mall. When the day came, I got socks and a practical backpack for school. 2 months later, for Alicia's 6th birthday, my parents threw her a princess-themed party with a hired magician and a custom cake that must have cost hundreds of dollars. She got the doll how she wanted, plus about a dozen other gifts. When I asked why my birthday had been so different, Mom just said, "We have to budget somewhere, Bo." My grades became my refuge. I figured if I couldn't win their love with just being me, maybe achievement would do it. I brought home straight A's from elementary school, joined the math club, even won the regional spelling bee in 5th grade. My trophy sat on my desk because there wasn't enough room on the family mantle, which somehow had space for Alicia's participation ribbon in the kindergarten fun run. The only person who seemed to see me was my grandmother, Elena. Grandma lived about 30 minutes away in a beautiful old Victorian house that had been in our family for generations. Whenever things got too tough at home, I'd bike to her place. She never questioned why I showed up unannounced, just welcomed me with fresh cookies and genuine interest in my life. "You're special, Bo," she would tell me while we worked on puzzles together. "Some people just can't see it yet." My Uncle Marcus, my dad's brother, sometimes noticed the unequal treatment. He once confronted my parents during a 4th of July barbecue when they made me clean the grill while Alicia played with her cousins. "Why is your son working while everyone else is having fun?" he asked. "He needs to learn responsibility," my dad replied without missing a beat. "And she doesn't," Uncle Marcus pushed back. The argument that followed created such tension that Uncle Marcus didn't visit again for months. When he did, he brought me books about computer programming, having noticed my interest in the family computer. Those books became my escape into a world I could control. By the time I hit middle school, the pattern was set. Christmas was particularly hard. When I was 13, I received clothes, school supplies, and a used laptop that had been my dad's work computer. Alicia got a brand new bike, an iPod, a designer jacket, and tickets to see her favorite band. The disparity was so obvious that even my grandmother looked pained. "I don't understand," I overheard her saying to my mother in the kitchen. "Why does Bo get so much less?" "Mom, please. Bo is fine with what he gets. He's a practical boy. Alicia is more emotional, she needs the extra attention." Practical. That was their code word for "we don't need to make an effort." The truth was, I wasn't fine. Each overlooked achievement and each forgettable birthday chipped away at my sense of worth. I stopped asking for things I wanted because hearing no was worse than not asking at all. The only thing that kept me going was Grandma Alina. During weekend visits, she would ask about my interests and actually listen to my answers. She bought me my first real programming book and let me practice on her computer. Unlike my parents, she displayed my school certificates and awards prominently on her refrigerator. She made me feel like I mattered. Your grandfather was a businessman with great vision, she told me once. I see that same spark in you, Beau. Don't let anyone dim it. Those words sustained me through the years when my parents would forget to come to my school presentations, but rearrange their entire schedule for Alicia's dance recitals. They became my mantra when I would hear my sister get praised for a B- while my A's were met with, "That's what we expect from you anyway." I developed a deep interest in business and computers, spending hours learning coding languages and reading about tech startups. My room became my sanctuary, filled with books and projects that nobody in my house cared about, nobody except Grandma Alina, who would listen intently when I explained what I was working on, even though technology wasn't her strong suit. Understanding isn't as important as supporting, she would say. And I support you 100%. By the time I reached high school, I had accepted that my parents would never give me the approval I craved. I had Grandma, and increasingly, I had my own sense of direction. I was determined to build something meaningful with my life, even if the people who should have been my biggest cheerleaders couldn't see my potential. High school should have been the time when my parents finally noticed my potential, but their blind spot when it came to me only grew larger. I maintained a 4.0 GPA while taking all advanced placement courses. I joined the robotics team and helped design a prototype that won the state championship. My name was regularly on the honor roll, and the principal knew me by name. None of it seemed to matter at home. Another A+. Good job, my dad would say without looking up from his newspaper, the praise as hollow as a chocolate Easter bunny. Meanwhile, Alicia struggled to maintain a C average but received endless praise for the smallest accomplishments. "Look at this C+ in algebra," my mom exclaimed one afternoon, sticking Alicia's test to the refrigerator with a magnet. "You're really improving, honey." My A+ math test from the same day never made it out of my backpack. What was the point? The divide between us grew most apparent during my junior year. I had entered my software project in the National Youth Technology Competition, a prestigious event that attracted college recruiters and even some venture capitalists looking for young talent. After months of late nights coding and refining my project, I made it to the finals. The award ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in March. I reminded my parents weeks in advance, even marking it on the family calendar in red pen. "This is really important to me," I told them over dinner. "The judges include people from MIT and Stanford." "We'll try our best to be there," Mom said, but there was something noncommittal in her voice that I'd learned to recognize. Sure enough, 2 days before the ceremony, Alicia announced that she had a last-minute dance recital scheduled for the same time. "It's not a big deal," I said, trying to mask my disappointment when my parents told me they couldn't make my competition. "I understand." But I didn't understand. Not really. What I understood was that I would never be the priority. I won first place at the competition. The judges praised my innovative approach to data security, and a representative from Carnegie Mellon gave me his business card. It should have been one of the proudest moments of my life, but as I accepted the trophy, I scanned the audience and saw only empty seats where my family should have been. Grandma Alina was there, though. She had taken a taxi across town, dressed in her Sunday best, and cheered louder than anyone when they called my name. "I knew you could do it," she said, hugging me tightly afterward. "Your grandfather would be so proud. He always valued innovation and hard work." That evening, when I returned home with my trophy and a $5,000 scholarship check, my parents were fussing over Alicia's participation certificate from her recital. "The dance instructor said she has natural rhythm," my mother gushed. My father noticed me standing in the doorway. "Oh, Beau. How was your thing?" "I won," I said quietly, placing the trophy on the counter. "And I got a scholarship." "That's nice," he replied before turning back to Alicia. "Show us that pirouette again, sweetie." Later that night, I found Grandma Alina sitting on our porch swing. She had stayed for dinner, watching silently as my achievement was glossed over. You know, she said as I joined her, success is the best revenge, but it's even better when you do it for yourself, not to prove others wrong. She reached into her purse and pulled out a book on financial literacy. Your grandfather built his wealth from nothing. I think you have that same ability, Bo. Let me teach you what he taught me. Those quiet moments with Grandma became my real education. While my parents focused on Alicia, Grandma Alina taught me about investments, business principles, and the power of compound interest. She showed me how to open a bank account without parental supervision and helped me invest the scholarship money instead of spending it. Knowledge that creates independence is the greatest gift I can give you, she said. As senior year approached, the topic of college created a new battleground. With my grades and extracurriculars, I had options, good ones. I wanted to study computer science at a top program, preferably on the West Coast where the tech industry was booming. Stanford is my dream school, I told my parents during dinner one night. Or maybe Carnegie Mellon. Their computer science programs are world-class. My father actually laughed at my ambition. Those schools cost a fortune, Bo. Be realistic. The community college has a decent program, and you can live at home to save money. But I've got the grades for scholarships, I protested. And with my competition wins. We need to be practical, my mother interrupted. Besides, we're saving for Alicia's education. She might want to attend a performing arts school, and those are expensive. The unfairness of it hit me like a physical blow. They were limiting my future to save for my sister's hypothetical education, a sister who had shown no academic promise or clear direction. What about what I want? I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I've worked hard for this. Don't raise your voice in this house, my father warned. This attitude is exactly why we don't think you're ready for some fancy university. You need to mature first. That night I called Grandma Alina in tears. They don't believe in me, I said. They never have. I believe in you, she replied firmly. And I'll help you. Apply to any school you want. Don't let their limitations become yours. True to her word, Grandma helped me with application fees and flew with me to visit campuses. When acceptance letters started arriving in spring, including one from Stanford with a partial scholarship, my parents were unmoved. The scholarship doesn't cover everything, my father pointed out. You'll be in debt for years. I'll figure it out, I said. I can work while studying. This is just you being stubborn, my mother added. Always thinking you know better than everyone else. The distance between us grew into a chasm. I felt like a stranger in my own home, counting down the days until I could leave. My 18th birthday passed with minimal acknowledgement, a card with $50 and a practical gift of luggage. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. At least the luggage would be useful when I left. Meanwhile, elaborate preparations were already underway for Alicia's Sweet 16, still months away. I overheard my parents discussing renting a venue and hiring a live band. She only turned 16 once, my father said, as if I hadn't just turned 18 once with nothing to show for it. By graduation, I had mentally checked out of family life. I focused on my exit strategy, working with Grandma Alina to secure student loans and a part-time job near campus. I had chosen Stanford, despite my parents' disapproval. When graduation day came, Grandma sat in the front row while my parents arrived late, having dropped Alicia off at a friend's pool party first. I was 18 years old and already felt decades older. The emotional neglect had forced me to become self-sufficient in ways my peers couldn't understand. But the worst was yet to come, a false accusation that would sever the last threads connecting me to my family. The summer after graduation passed in a blur of preparation for college. I worked double shifts at a local electronics store, saving every penny for expenses that my loans wouldn't cover. Meanwhile, my parents threw themselves into planning Alicia's Sweet 16 with an enthusiasm they'd never shown for anything related to me. The party was scheduled for August 12th, just 2 weeks before I was set to leave for Stanford. I had mixed feelings about attending. Part of me wanted to skip it entirely, but Grandma Alina insisted that bridges were easier to maintain than to rebuild. Sometimes we show up for family even when they don't deserve it, she told me. Not for them, but for ourselves, so we can look in the mirror and know we tried. So I went, dressed in the nicest clothes I owned, and sat quietly through the elaborate celebration. The backyard had been transformed with twinkling lights and a dance floor. A professional photographer captured every moment as Alicia made her grand entrance in a designer dress that probably cost more than my first semester's books. The contrast to my own 18th birthday, a rushed dinner at a chain restaurant where my father spent half the time on business calls, couldn't have been more stark. The evening reached its climax when my parents presented Alicia with her big gift, a white gold diamond bracelet that made the assembled teenagers gasp. It was delicate and glittering, with a heart-shaped clasp. "It's been in the family for generations," my mother explained as she fastened it around Alicia's wrist. "Your great-grandmother gave it to Grandma Elena, who gave it to me, and now it's yours." I caught Grandma's eye across the room. She looked troubled, though she quickly masked it with a smile. Later, she confided that she had assumed the bracelet would go to the first grandchild to turn 18, which was me, but she hadn't wanted to create a scene. "Things are just things, Beau," she whispered. "Don't let this hurt you more than it already has." But it did hurt. It was yet another symbol of my second-class status in the family. I left the party early, retreating to my room to finalize my packing plans. In just 2 weeks, I would be free of this house and its painful dynamics. The next morning, chaos erupted. "It's gone. My bracelet is gone," Alicia's scream pierced the Sunday morning quiet. I was in the kitchen making coffee when she came tearing in, her face streaked with tears. My parents rushed in behind her, still in their bathrobes. "What do you mean it's gone?" my mother demanded. "I put it in its box on my nightstand before I went to sleep, and now it's not there," Alicia wailed. "Someone stole it." My father's face darkened as he turned to me. "Did you take it?" The question hit me like a slap. "What? No. Why would I take her bracelet?" "You were upset last night," my mother chimed in. "We all noticed how you left early." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So your first thought is that I committed theft?" "Over a piece of jewelry." "It was a family heirloom worth thousands," my father said, his voice rising. "And you've been angry about money for college. Maybe you thought you could sell it." The accusation was so outlandish that I actually laughed, which was clearly the wrong reaction. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. "This isn't a joke," he snapped. "That bracelet is missing, and you're the only one with a motive." "My motive is getting to Stanford in 2 weeks, not stealing jewelry," I shot back. "Have you considered that maybe Alicia misplaced it? Or that it fell somewhere?" "I didn't misplace it," Alicia sobbed. "It was in the box and now it's gone. And you were jealous. Everyone saw your face when Mom gave it to me." The next hour was a frenzy of searching. My mother and Alicia combed through Alicia's room while my father insisted on searching mine. "If you have nothing to hide, you won't mind," he said coldly. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, as he rifled through my drawers and checked under my mattress. The violation was complete when he dumped out my already packed suitcase, sending carefully folded clothes tumbling across the floor. No bracelet was found, of course, but that didn't clear my name. By afternoon, the entire house had been searched except for one place. My car. I had purchased an old Honda Civic with money saved from my job, and it was parked in the driveway. "We need to check your car," my father announced. "This is ridiculous," I protested, but I handed over my keys anyway. I had nothing to hide. The search of my car was thorough and humiliating, with neighbors watching from their yards. My father emptied the glove compartment, checked under the seats, and even popped the trunk. Still no bracelet. But the lack of evidence didn't matter. In my parents' eyes, I had already been tried and convicted. "I don't know where you've hidden it," my father said as we returned to the house, "but I know you took it." "Based on what evidence?" I demanded. "You've searched everything I own." "Based on 16 years of knowing you," my mother replied. "You've always been jealous of your sister. Always felt entitled to more than we could give you." The conversation devolved from there, with old grievances being dredged up, times I had talked back, occasions when I had questioned their decisions. None of it had anything to do with the missing bracelet, but in their minds, it formed a pattern of behavior that proved my guilt. Grandma Alina arrived in the middle of the argument, having been called by my mother. I expected her to defend me, but she wasn't given the chance to speak before my father issued his ultimatum. Either you tell us where the bracelet is and apologize to your sister, or you can leave this house right now. The room went silent. Even Alicia stopped crying. I didn't take the bracelet, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I would never steal from anyone, let alone my own family. But if you can't believe that, then I guess I'll leave. Bo, wait, Grandma tried to intervene. Frank, Diana, surely we can talk this through reasonably. There's nothing to discuss, my father replied. He's made his choice. I looked at each of them, my father's rigid stance, my mother's disappointed frown, Alicia's tear-stained face twisted with accusation, and Grandma's distress. I'll be out within the hour, I said. Packing was a blur. I grabbed essentials, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and important documents. Grandma Alina followed me to my room, closing the door behind her. This is madness, she whispered. Let me talk to them. It won't make any difference, I replied, stuffing socks into my duffel bag. They've made up their minds about me. They always have. Where will you go? I'll figure something out. Maybe crash with a friend until college starts. She pressed a credit card into my hand. Take this. It's connected to my account. Use it for a hotel, food, whatever you need. I'll call you tomorrow when things have calmed down. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender perfume. Thank you for being the one person who believes in me. Always, she promised. Walking out of my childhood home with just 2 bags and a backpack was surreal. My parents watched silently from the living room, making no move to stop me. Alicia stayed in her room, door closed. Only Grandma followed me to my car, slipping me an envelope before I drove away. Don't open it until you're somewhere safe, she instructed. 3 blocks away, I pulled over and opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was $5,000 in cash and a note. This isn't all I'll do to help you, but it's a start. Call me when you're settled. You are not alone. All my love, Grandma. That night, I checked into an extended stay hotel and cried for the first time since the accusation. Not for the loss of my parents' love, I'd been grieving that gradually for years, but for the finality of it all. There would be no reconciliation, no moment of clarity where they suddenly saw me for who I really was. The door had closed on that possibility the moment they chose to believe the worst about me without evidence. A week later, Grandma called with news that should have vindicated me but somehow made everything worse. Alicia found the bracelet, she said quietly. It had fallen into the lining of her purse. She carried it to a friend's house the night of the party to show it off. Did they call to apologize? I asked, already knowing the answer. Your father called. He said you're welcome to come home now, but he thinks it would be good if you apologized to Alicia for the stress you caused her. The audacity was so breathtaking that I couldn't even form words for several seconds. I'm not going back, I finally said. Not now, not ever. And I meant it. 2 weeks later, I drove to California alone, leaving Atlanta and its painful memories in my rearview mirror. I had Grandma Alina's support and my own determination. It would have to be enough. The first few months in California were harder than I'd imagined. I'd secured a tiny studio apartment near campus, but the security deposit had taken most of my savings. Between classes and studying, I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore and another 15 delivering food on weekends. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't often afford. Grandma Alina called weekly, wiring money when she could, though I tried not to accept too much. I'm investing in your future, she would insist when I protested. Let me do this for you. She also provided updates from home, none of which surprised me. My parents had apparently crafted a narrative where I had overreacted to a simple misunderstanding. Alicia was flourishing in her senior year, already applying to expensive performing arts schools with my parents' enthusiastic backing. Did they ever acknowledge they were wrong? I asked once. Grandma's silence was answer enough. Around midterms of my first semester, I received a brief, awkward call from my parents. There was no real apology, just vague statements about water under the bridge and family needing to stick together. "Were your parents, Bo?" my mother said. "You can't stay angry forever." But it wasn't anger that kept me distant, it was self-preservation. Without admitting their mistake or showing any understanding of the pain they'd caused, reconciliation seemed pointless. I kept the conversation short and didn't call back. I threw myself into my studies with a determination born of necessity. If I lost my scholarship due to poor grades, I'd lose everything. Computer science courses were demanding, but I thrived on the challenge. The logical nature of coding provided structure when everything else felt chaotic. During my sophomore year, I met Professor Jacob Mitchell, who would become both mentor and friend. After I aced his data structures course, he invited me to join his research lab. "You have a unique approach to problem solving," he told me. "And I could use someone with your skills on a project I'm developing." The project was a security algorithm for medical data systems, complex, challenging work that consumed my free time but introduced me to people who would shape my career. Through Professor Mitchell, I met tech entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and fellow students with ambitious dreams. One of those students, Ryan, became my first real business partner. During our junior year, we developed an app that helped students find and share affordable textbooks. What started as a campus-specific solution gained traction at neighboring universities. "We should scale this," Ryan suggested after our app hit 10,000 users. "There's real potential here." With guidance from Professor Mitchell, we incorporated our first company. The initial investment came from a small business grant and, secretly, from Grandma Alina, who insisted on being a silent partner. "Your grandfather would have done the same," she said when she transferred $30,000 to our business account. "He always said opportunity knocks softly, only those who are listening will hear it." By the time senior year rolled around, our app had evolved into a comprehensive platform for student resources. We were making enough profit that I could reduce my other jobs and focus on graduation and growing the business. Through it all, my only family contact remained Grandma Alina. I learned through her that Alicia had dropped out of performing arts school after one semester, finding it too demanding. She was living at home again, supposedly working on a singing career that never seemed to materialize. My parents had dipped into their retirement savings to cover her tuition and continued to support her financially. The contrast between our paths couldn't have been more stark, but I took no pleasure in it. I was building my life block by painful block while she remained trapped in a cycle of dependence and entitlement fostered by our parents. After graduation, with our company gaining steady traction, I made the decision to stay in California. Silicon Valley was where tech innovation happened, and I wanted to be in the middle of it. I rented a modest apartment in San Jose and focused on growing our user base. The next 3 years were a whirlwind of 18-hour workdays, investor meetings, and product iterations. We expanded our team, survived a few near bankruptcies, and eventually caught the attention of a major educational technology company. When they offered to buy us out for 7 figures, Ryan wanted to accept immediately. "This is life-changing money," he argued. But something in me, perhaps the stubborn streak my parents had always criticized, knew we were just getting started. "Let's counter with a partnership instead," I suggested. "We keep majority ownership but gain their distribution channels." It was a risky move that paid off spectacularly. Within 2 years, our platform was being used by over 2 million students across the country. The valuation of our company multiplied, and at 28, I found myself financially secure in a way I couldn't have imagined when I was sleeping on friends' couches after being kicked out. My success allowed me to fly Grandma Alina out to California regularly. She marveled at my office in Palo Alto and the team of developers who now worked for me. During her visits, we would take drives along the coast and talk about everything except my parents and Alicia. Until one visit when she gently broached the subject. "They ask about you, you know," she said as we watched the sunset at Half Moon Bay. "They've seen articles about your company online. And now they're interested, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. How convenient. People can change, Bo. Have they? Really? Or do they just regret missing out on my success? Grandma sighed, looking suddenly every one of her 78 years. I'm not defending what they did. It was unforgivable. But I worry about you carrying this weight forever. I put my arm around her thin shoulders. I'm happy, Grandma. Genuinely. I've built a good life here. I even started dating someone, Sarah, the UX designer I told you about. She understands me. That's wonderful, she smiled. I just want you to be open to healing, whatever form that takes. But healing seemed impossible when every update from Atlanta confirmed that nothing had really changed. My parents still treated Alicia like the sun their world revolved around, even as she drifted between half-hearted career attempts, boutique owner, yoga instructor, jewelry designer, all funded by my parents. Meanwhile, I had no contact with them beyond perfunctory birthday and Christmas cards. They never called directly, always filtering communication through Grandma. It was as if we'd all silently agreed to maintain the fiction of family while acknowledging the reality of our estrangement. It wasn't perfect, but it was an equilibrium I had learned to live with. I had my company, my growing relationship with Sarah, and Grandma Aliner's unwavering support. I told myself it was enough. Until the day I received the call that changed everything again. Bo, it's your mother, came the unexpected voice when I answered my phone. Grandma Aliner has had a stroke. You need to come home. I was on the first available flight to Atlanta, anxiety twisting my stomach into knots. In the 10 years since I'd left home, I'd returned only for brief visits with Grandma Aliner, carefully timed to avoid family gatherings. Now, rushing back to potentially say goodbye, there would be no avoiding my parents. Sarah had offered to come with me, but this was a journey I needed to make alone. Call me anytime, she said at the airport drop-off, her eyes full of concern. Day or night? The Atlanta skyline looked both familiar and foreign as my plane descended. This city had been home for 18 years, yet I felt like a visitor now. An Uber took me straight to Piedmont Hospital, where I found my mother pacing in the waiting room. Bo, she said, her voice catching slightly. Her hair had more gray than I remembered, and the lines around her eyes had deepened. How is she? I asked, skipping any pretense at a warm reunion. Stable but unconscious. The doctors say the next 48 hours are critical. My father and Alicia were already in Grandma's room when we entered. Dad had aged considerably, his once broad shoulders now slightly stooped. Alicia looked much the same, though her designer clothes and carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the brittleness in her smile. Hello, son, my father said stiffly. I nodded in acknowledgement, but my attention was fixed on the frail figure in the hospital bed. Grandma Aliner, always so vibrant and strong in my mind, looked small beneath the white sheets, tubes and wires connecting her to beeping machines. I moved to her side and gently took her hand. I'm here, Grandma, I whispered. It's Bo. For the next 3 days, we maintained an awkward rotation at her bedside. My parents and Alicia would leave when I arrived, returning only when I stepped out for food or fresh air. We communicated through nurses and doctors rather than directly with each other. On the 4th day, as I sat reading softly to Grandma from her favorite poetry book, her fingers twitched in mine. Grandma, I leaned closer. Can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Recognition dawned in her gaze. Bo, she whispered, her voice barely audible. My boy. I called for the nurse, who quickly summoned the doctor. After examining her, he delivered cautiously optimistic news. The stroke had caused some damage, but Grandma was awake and responsive, a good sign for recovery. When my parents returned and found Grandma conscious, the relief was palpable. But their attention quickly shifted from celebration to logistics. She can't live alone after this, my mother declared. She'll need constant care. I've been researching rehabilitation facilities, my father added. Actually, I interrupted, I've already spoken with her doctor about in-home care. I'll hire a full-time nurse and make sure she has everything she needs. That's very generous, my mother said carefully, but your life is in California. We're here in Atlanta. It makes more sense for us to handle her care. The old dynamic reasserted itself instantly, my input dismissed, my solutions overlooked. But I wasn't the same person they had kicked out a decade ago. I can work remotely, I stated firmly. And I have the financial resources to ensure she receives the best care possible. This isn't up for debate. The surprise on their faces might have been comical under different circumstances. My father's mouth opened, then closed without speaking. Alicia looked between us with wide eyes, unused to anyone challenging our parents' authority. Over the next week, as Grandma Alina regained strength, I split my time between her hospital room and her house, setting up a home office and making arrangements for her return. My company could function without my physical presence for a few weeks, and Sarah promised to handle anything urgent. It was during this time that I noticed subtle attempts from my parents to reconnect. My mother brought homemade food to the hospital for all of us. My father asked questions about my company, showing more interest than he ever had in my education or career. I maintained polite distance, focusing on Grandma's recovery rather than their belated attention. Their sudden interest felt hollow, too little, too late, and almost certainly influenced by my obvious financial success. Grandma improved enough to have private conversations, and during one quiet afternoon, she beckoned me closer to her bed. "I need to tell you something important," she said, her voice stronger but still fragile. "You should rest," I protested gently. "No, this can't wait," she clasped my hand with surprising strength. "I've updated my will, Beau. After what happened with you and your parents, I realized some changes were necessary." "Grandma, please. I don't want to talk about wills or inheritance. You're going to recover. We all pass eventually, dear one. And I want you to be prepared for what comes next. There may be resistance." Before she could elaborate, a nurse entered for medication rounds, and the moment passed. But her words lingered in my mind, a warning of sorts. 2 days later, Grandma suffered a second, more severe stroke. This time there was no recovery. The doctors explained that the damage was too extensive, and all we could do was keep her comfortable. For 3 days, our fractured family maintained a vigil at her bedside. On the third night, when my parents and Alicia had gone home to rest, leaving me alone with Grandma, she briefly regained consciousness. "Beau," she whispered, her eyes finding mine in the dim light. "Remember what I taught you? About value. About worth." "I remember," I said, throat tight with unshed tears. "You were always the one who understood. The true legacy." Her breathing grew labored. "Promise me you'll use it wisely." "I promise," I vowed, holding her hand until her breathing slowed, then stopped altogether. Grandma Alina passed peacefully at 3:17 in the morning, with only me by her side. After the doctors confirmed her death, I sat alone with her for an hour, thanking her silently for being my anchor when everyone else had set me adrift. The funeral was held 3 days later, a elegant, dignified service that reflected Grandma's character. I helped carry her casket, alongside my father, Uncle Marcus, and 2 cousins. The weight felt symbolic somehow, a final burden we shared unequally. During the reception afterward, I noticed my parents and Alicia accepting condolences with an air of expectation. Several times I overheard phrases like family home and Alina's estate exchanged in hushed tones. It seemed everyone assumed that Alicia, as the favored grandchild, would inherit the bulk of Grandma's substantial assets. Uncle Marcus approached me as I stood alone near the window of the funeral home's reception room. "She was proud of you," he said simply. "Always talked about your accomplishments when we spoke. Thank you for saying that." He hesitated, then added, "Things might get complicated in the coming weeks. Just remember that Alina knew exactly what she was doing. She was sharp as a tack until the end." Before I could ask what he meant, my mother appeared at my elbow. "The lawyer wants to schedule the reading of the will for next Friday," she informed me. "Can you extend your stay, or should we handle things without you?" The question carried an implication that my presence was optional, unnecessary even. Some things never changed. "I'll be there," I replied. "This is important to me." "Of course," she nodded, a hint of calculation in her eyes. Family has to stick together in times like these. Family. The word felt hollow coming from the woman who had stood by while my father threw me out over a false accusation. But I kept my expression neutral and excused myself to speak with other mourners. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of estate arrangements and uncomfortable family meals where conversation remained superficial. I continued working remotely, grateful for the distraction of video conferences and coding problems that required my full attention. Through it all, I caught glimpses of my parents and Alicia whispering together, planning how to utilize what they clearly viewed as their upcoming windfall. Alicia mentioned expanding her latest business venture, a small clothing boutique that was already failing after 6 months. My father talked about renovations to their house and possibly an investment property. Not once did anyone mention Grandma's values or legacy beyond material possessions. Not once did they acknowledge that she had been more parent to me than they ever were. The reading of the will was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon at the offices of Harrison and Barnes, attorneys at law. I arrived 15 minutes early to find my parents and Alicia already seated in the conference room, expressions expectant. Mr. Harrison, a silver-haired man in his 60s who had been Grandma's lawyer for decades, began with standard legal preamble. I half listened, my thoughts on the last conversation I'd had with Grandma and her cryptic warning. Now, regarding the distribution of assets, Mr. Harrison continued, bringing my attention back to the present. Mrs. Eleanor Montgomery has made some very specific designations. He adjusted his reading glasses and continued, to my son Frank Montgomery and his wife Diana, I leave the sum of $50,000. My father's smile faltered slightly. $50,000 was generous, but far less than the substantial estate they had clearly been expecting to control. To my granddaughter Alicia Montgomery, I leave the sum of $25,000 and my collection of vintage costume jewelry. Alicia's gasp was audible. That's it, she blurted out. Mr. Harrison looked at her over his glasses but continued without comment. All remaining assets, including the family home at 42 Maple Street, all financial investments and accounts, business holdings, and family heirlooms not otherwise specified, I leave to my grandson, Beau Montgomery. The room went completely silent. I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. This is ridiculous, my father finally sputtered. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, Mr. Harrison replied calmly. Mrs. Montgomery was very clear about her wishes. She also left a letter for Beau to be read privately. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandma's elegant script. My mother's face had gone white. But the family home has been in our family for generations. It should stay in the direct line. And it has, Mr. Harrison noted. Beau is as much family as anyone in this room. He abandoned his family years ago, my father countered, anger coloring his voice. Walked out and barely looked back. The irony of his statement was so profound that I nearly laughed. Instead, I found my voice at last. I was kicked out, I corrected quietly. Over a bracelet Alicia lost. Or have you rewritten that history too? Alicia at least had the grace to look uncomfortable, but my father pressed on. Eleanor wasn't thinking clearly after her first stroke. We'll contest this. She was clearly not of sound mind. Mr. Harrison shook his head. This will was drawn up and signed 8 months ago, well before any health issues. Furthermore, Mrs. Montgomery underwent a full cognitive evaluation at the time, specifically to prevent such claims. The documentation is extensive and irrefutable. The lawyer slid a folder across the table to me. These are the official papers transferring ownership of all assets. The total value is approximately $3.7 million, including the house, investment portfolio, and liquid assets. My parents' expressions shifted from shock to calculation almost instantly. Alicia, always quicker to adapt when personal gain was involved, placed her hand on my arm. Beau, we're family, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. I'm sure Grandma would want you to share with us. After all, she loved all of us. I gently removed her hand and stood, gathering the documents. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate your thoroughness. You can't seriously be walking out with everything, my father said, rising from his chair. After all we've done for you. The statement was so absurd that I couldn't help but respond. All you've done for me? You mean like accusing me of theft without evidence? Or kicking me out with nowhere to go? Or perhaps you mean the years of favoritism and emotional neglect? You always were dramatic, my mother cut in. Always feeling sorry for yourself. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I'm not going to argue about the past. The will is clear, and I intend to honor Grandma's wishes. As I turned to leave, my father called after me, "This isn't over, Beau. Family doesn't treat family this way." The lesson came 10 years too late. In the privacy of my hotel room, I opened Grandma's letter with trembling hands. My dearest Beau, if you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next. Don't grieve too long. I've had a good life, filled with love, even if not everyone in our family understood what that truly means. I'm leaving you everything because you embody the values your grandfather and I held dear. Integrity, hard work, resilience, and compassion despite hardship. You've built yourself from nothing, just as he did, but you've never become hard or bitter in the process. That takes remarkable strength. Your parents and sister will be angry. Let them be. Perhaps this will finally teach them that actions have consequences, that relationships require nurturing, and that true worth isn't measured in possessions but in character. Use this inheritance wisely. Not just the money and property, but the legacy of values it represents. Help others who struggle as you did. Create opportunities. Build something lasting. And perhaps someday, if they truly change, find it in your heart to forgive your family, not for their sake, but for yours. Carrying anger is too heavy a burden for such a bright spirit. All my love always. Grandma Leaner. I sat with her words for a long time, tears streaming down my face. She had seen me, truly seen me, when no one else had bothered to look. And now she had given me not just financial security, but validation of everything I had fought to become. Over the next week, as I worked with Mr. Harrison to transfer assets and properties, the messages and calls from my family became increasingly frequent and desperate. Threats of legal action gave way to guilt trips, which eventually morphed into tearful pleas. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I returned to California with Grandma's letter and the knowledge that she had believed in me until the very end. The weeks following my return to California were a storm of emotion and activity. Sarah was my anchor through it all, helping me process the magnitude of what had happened. She loved you enough to make a statement with her final act, she said as we walked along the beach one evening. That's powerful. I just wish she could see what I plan to do with it, I replied. My vision for Grandma's legacy began taking shape almost immediately. I established the Aliner Montgomery Scholarship Foundation to help students from disadvantaged backgrounds pursue careers in technology. The first 5 scholarships would be awarded to teens who, like me, had overcome significant family obstacles. Meanwhile, the backlash from Atlanta continued. My parents' lawyer sent a formal letter challenging the will on grounds of undue influence, despite Mr. Harrison's assurances that such claims would fail. Alicia left tearful voicemails about how she had counted on Grandma's money to expand her boutique, which was now facing bankruptcy. You have your own business, she sobbed in one message. You don't need this money like I do. I didn't bother explaining the difference between earning success and expecting it to be handed to you. Some lessons can only be learned through experience. Uncle Marcus called with a different perspective. They're spinning quite a tale around town, he informed me. According to them, you manipulated Aliner for years, turning her against them with lies about your childhood. That's absurd, I said. Grandma lived next door to them for decades. She saw everything firsthand. I know that, and deep down they know it too. But it's easier than admitting they failed you. 2 months after the will reading, I flew back to Atlanta to oversee renovations on Grandma's house. I had decided not to sell it. The Victorian held too many precious memories, and I wanted to preserve it as a part of our family's true legacy. The contractor I hired had just started work when a familiar car pulled into the driveway. My parents and Alicia emerged, looking surprisingly composed. "We need to talk," my father announced as I met them on the porch. "I'm listening," I replied, maintaining a safe emotional distance. "We've been thinking," my mother began, her voice carefully modulated. "Perhaps we've all been too hasty. Family should be able to work things out without lawyers." "What exactly are you proposing?" My father stepped forward. "We think Alina would have wanted the house to stay in the family, specifically with us, since we live here in Atlanta and can maintain it properly." "The house is staying in the family," I pointed out. "With me." "But you live in California," Alicia interjected. "This is our home city. We have connections here, memories." "So do I replied. "Not all of them good, but this house holds the best of them." My father's facade of reasonableness began to crack. "Look, we're trying to be fair here. We're willing to drop the legal challenge if you'll transfer the house and half of the financial assets to us." "That seems equitable." I almost laughed at the audacity. "Equitable? After you threw me out over a false accusation. After years of favoritism and neglect. Grandma made her wishes clear, and I intend to honor them." "You've always been selfish," my mother snapped, the pleasant mask falling away completely. "Always thinking only of yourself." "That's rich coming from you," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "When have you ever put my needs first? When have you ever chosen me over Alicia?" "Here we go again with the victim routine," my father groaned. "When will you grow up and stop blaming us for your issues?" "I'm not blaming you for my success," I clarified. "I earned that despite you, not because of you. I'm simply pointing out the irony of you calling me selfish when you're here demanding assets you didn't earn and aren't entitled to." Alicia stepped between us, adopting the peacemaker role that was new to her. "Beau, please. My business is failing. Dad's talking about early retirement. We really need this." For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered all the times I had needed them, emotionally, financially, as parents, and come up empty. "I'm sorry your business is struggling," I said sincerely. "But throwing money at the problem won't fix the underlying issues. You've never had to work for anything, Alicia. That's the real disadvantage you've faced." "How dare you?" my mother gasped. "We've supported her dreams." "Yes, you have." To her detriment, I glanced at my watch. "I have a meeting with the contractor in 15 minutes. I think we're done here." "This isn't over," my father warned as they retreated to their car. "You'll regret turning your back on family when you need us someday." The threat rang hollow. I had needed them at 18, homeless and heartbroken, and they had been nowhere to be found. The next morning, I woke to discover that someone had spray-painted "Family Traitor" across the front of Grandma's house. The police officer who responded seemed skeptical of my suggestion that my own relatives might be responsible. "Family disputes can get heated," he acknowledged, "but vandalism is usually kids or random troublemakers." I didn't argue, but I hired security for the property before returning to California. Over the next few months, the situation escalated. My parents formally contested the will, forcing me to spend time and resources fighting a legal battle I hadn't wanted. Their social media accounts filled with vague posts about ungrateful children and family loyalty, carefully worded to avoid defamation while making their target clear. Mutual acquaintances reported that my parents were telling anyone who would listen about how I had manipulated Grandma in her final years, painting themselves as victims of elder exploitation rather than facing the consequences of their own actions. Through it all, I focused on honoring Grandma's legacy. The Scholarship Foundation awarded its first grants to 5 promising students. The renovations on the Victorian house transformed it into a beautiful community space for tech education programs, with the upstairs maintained as a private residence for my visits to Atlanta. I also started therapy, recognizing that Grandma's passing and the family conflict had reopened old wounds that needed proper healing. Sarah supported me through the process, her steady presence a reminder that family could be chosen, not just inherited. 6 months after Grandma's death, the court dismissed my parents' challenge to the will. Mr. Harrison called with the news, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "The judge was quite direct in her ruling," he reported. She cited the extensive documentation of your grandmother's mental competence and the clear expression of her wishes. Your parents have no further legal recourse. Thank you for handling this so thoroughly, I said, relief washing over me. Eleanor would be proud of how you've managed this situation, he replied. She told me once that her greatest regret was not intervening more forcefully when you were young, but that her greatest joy was seeing the man you became in spite of everything. The conversation left me reflective. With the legal battle concluded, I could finally move forward without looking over my shoulder. The scholarship foundation was thriving, the community programs at Grandma's house were making a difference, and my company had just launched an innovative new platform that was garnering industry attention. By all objective measures, I had won. Yet victory felt hollow without reconciliation, not because I needed my parents' approval anymore, but because the continued conflict would have saddened Grandma. I reread her letter that night, focusing on her final paragraph. And perhaps someday, if they truly change, find it in your heart to forgive your family, not for their sake, but for yours. Carrying anger is too heavy a burden for such a bright spirit. The wisdom of her words resonated deeply. The anger I had carried for so long had served its purpose, fueling my determination to prove myself. But now it was becoming a weight rather than a motivator. I decided to extend one final olive branch, not expecting it to be accepted, but knowing I needed to try for my own peace of mind. I drafted a letter to my parents and Alicia, acknowledging the pain on all sides while maintaining firm boundaries. I offered to establish a trust for Alicia's education if she wanted to develop actual business skills, and a smaller one for my parents' retirement, contingent on family counseling. It wasn't a surrender of Grandma's wishes, but an attempt to honor her values of compassion and family healing. I mailed the letter and then let it go, focusing on my life in California and the future I was building with Sarah. 2 weeks passed with no response. I assumed my offer had been rejected or ignored, and I made peace with that possibility. Then one rainy Sunday morning, my doorbell rang. The sight of my parents and Alicia standing on my doorstep in the pouring rain was so unexpected that for a moment I thought I was hallucinating. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the journey or perhaps by circumstances I didn't yet understand. "May we come in?" my father asked, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "We've come a long way to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside. "The living room is through there." They filed in silently, dripping rainwater onto my hardwood floors. I brought towels and offered coffee, falling back on hospitality to mask my confusion. Once they were settled, an uncomfortable silence descended. My mother broke it first. "Your home is lovely." "Thank you," I replied, wondering if this visit would be another attempt to access Grandma's inheritance through emotional manipulation. "We got your letter," my father said, getting straight to the point. "It was unexpected, as is this visit," I noted. "You could have called." "Some conversations need to happen face to face," he replied, then took a deep breath. "We're in trouble, Beau. Financial trouble. Dad's company downsized," Alicia explained. "He was offered early retirement, but the package wasn't what they promised. And my boutique is officially bankrupt," she continued, her voice cracking. "I owe creditors nearly $80,000. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said genuinely. Job loss and business failure were painful experiences, regardless of our history. "We were counting on Mom's inheritance," my father admitted, a flush of embarrassment coloring his face. "We'd already taken out loans against what we expected to receive." The picture became clearer. Their desperation wasn't just about wanting Grandma's money, they had already spent it in their minds, perhaps even leveraged themselves based on that expectation. "And now you're underwater," I concluded. My mother nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "We might lose the house. We've already sold both cars and most of our investments." Part of me, the wounded 18-year-old who had been thrown out with nowhere to go, wanted to respond with righteous satisfaction. But the man I had become, the one Grandma had believed in, recognized the opportunity in this moment. "I'm genuinely sorry you're struggling," I said carefully. "But I need to understand something first. Have you come here because you've had a change of heart about our relationship, or because you need financial help? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable but necessary. Both, my father said after a long pause. Though I admit we might not be here if we weren't in trouble. His honesty, however painful, was a start. The things we did, the way we treated you growing up, and especially the bracelet incident, my mother began haltingly. We've had a lot of time to think about it since Alina passed. 10 years wasn't enough time, I couldn't help asking. We were wrong, Alicia interjected. I was wrong. I knew you wouldn't take my bracelet, but I let them believe it because it was easier than admitting I had been careless. Her admission stunned me into silence. After all these years, hearing her acknowledge this truth was both vindicating and reopened the old wound. The way we raised you both was unfair, my father continued. We favored Alicia. We downplayed your accomplishments. We failed you as parents. And when Grandma left everything to you, Alicia added, it forced us to face what we had done. Why she had made that choice? It's taken losing everything for us to understand what you lost years ago, my mother said quietly. Your family, your sense of belonging, your home. Their words seemed sincere, their remorse genuine. But years of experience had taught me to be cautious. I appreciate you saying this, I replied. But I need to be clear. If reconciliation comes with an expectation of financial rescue without changes on your part, it won't work. That would just continue the unhealthy patterns we've always had. That's fair, my father nodded. We don't deserve your help. But we're asking anyway, not just for money, but for a chance to try again as a family. I studied their faces, searching for signs of manipulation or insincerity. What I saw instead was exhaustion, regret, and a fragile hope. The offer in my letter stands, I said finally. I'll establish the trust I mentioned with conditions. For Alicia, education and business training before access to capital. For you both, financial counseling and family therapy. We'll do it, my mother agreed immediately. All of it. And one more thing, I added. A genuine acknowledgement of what happened with the bracelet. A proper apology, not just to move forward, but to close that chapter completely. My father looked me in the eyes for what felt like the first time in decades. I'm sorry, Bo. We accused you without evidence, chose to believe the worst about you, and then punished you severely for something you didn't do. When the truth came out, we were too proud to admit our mistake. We failed you as parents in that moment and in many moments before it. There's no excuse for what we did. The words I had waited years to hear landed with unexpected weight. I felt a knot in my chest begin to loosen, not dissolve completely, but loosen enough to allow for the possibility of healing. Thank you, I said simply. That means something to me. Over the next few hours, we talked more openly than we had in my entire life. They shared the reality of their financial situation, worse than I had imagined, with credit card debt and a second mortgage taken out in anticipation of Grandma's inheritance. I outlined my conditions for help more specifically, making clear that this would be a hand up, not a handout. The goal is to help you become financially independent, I explained. Not to create ongoing dependency. Like you've done with those scholarship students, Alicia noted. I read about your foundation online. It's really impressive, Bo. Her compliment, awkward but seemingly genuine, signaled a shift in our sibling dynamic that I hadn't expected. When Sarah arrived home from her morning run, she handled the surprise visitors with grace, ordering lunch delivery and contributing thoughtfully to the conversation. Her presence helped normalize the strangeness of having my estranged family in our home. By late afternoon, we had reached a tentative agreement. I would help them restructure their debt and provide a modest monthly stipend while they rebuilt their financial foundation. Alicia would enroll in business courses at a local college. All three would participate in family therapy with me via video conference. This isn't forgiveness yet, I clarified as they prepared to leave for their hotel. It's an opportunity to build something new. Whether we get there depends on all of us. We understand, my mother said. And we're grateful for the chance. As they left, I felt neither triumph nor resentment, but a quiet hope tinged with caution. Grandma Alina would have approved, I thought. She had always believed in second chances, but never without accountability. The months that followed brought cautious progress. My parents completed financial counseling and began slowly rebuilding their credit. Alicia discovered a genuine interest in digital marketing and threw herself into her courses with unexpected dedication. Our therapy sessions were often tense but increasingly productive as old patterns were identified and challenged. There were setbacks: my father's occasional defensive reactions, my mother's tendency to minimize past hurts, my own difficulty trusting their motives. But there was also growth. Alicia called to discuss her business ideas rather than ask for money. My parents remembered my birthday with a thoughtful gift rather than an afterthought. Small steps but meaningful ones. A year after their appearance at my doorstep, we gathered at Grandma's house, now the Aliner Montgomery Technology Center, to celebrate the second round of scholarship recipients. Watching my parents genuinely congratulate these young people, seeing Alicia help a shy teenager explain her project to the group, I felt Grandma's presence in the room. Later that evening, alone in what had been her study, I found myself talking to her as if she could hear me. "You knew this might happen," I said to the empty chair where she used to sit. "You knew they might finally learn, but only through losing everything. That's why you left it all to me." The inheritance had never been about the money or property. It had been Grandma's final lesson to my parents about consequences, to Alicia about earned versus entitled success, and to me about the power of forgiveness without forgetting. Our family relationship remains a work in progress. Some wounds may never fully heal, but they've scarred over, no longer raw and bleeding. We're building something new from the ashes of what was lost, not a perfect family, but perhaps a healthier one. Sarah and I are expecting our first child next spring. We've decided to name her Aliner if it's a girl, honoring the woman who believed in me when no one else did. My parents' excitement about becoming grandparents seems genuine, though I watch carefully for signs of the old favoritism patterns as they interact with our niece, Alicia's daughter from a relationship that didn't last. The missing bracelet that changed the course of my life sits in a display case at the Technology Center, donated by Alicia as a symbol of our family's journey. Beside it is a simple plaque that reads, "From small actions come great consequences. Choose wisely." It's a daily reminder of how quickly trust can be broken and how painfully slow rebuilding it can be. But also of how resilience, hard work, and integrity eventually reveal a person's true character, just as Grandma always believed they would. Have you ever experienced family favoritism or been wrongly accused of something that changed your relationship forever? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember to share this with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the family we build can be stronger than the family we're born into. Thank you for being part of this vulnerable moment, and I wish you healing in your own journey, whatever form it may take.